He's done just about everything. He's maybe known the most for basketball and then golf, but he's written about a lot of different things as well. I mentioned that I often have searched for detective stories that sort of fit into the kind of first person, which is the way Raymond Chandler wrote, which is the way Robert Parker writes. And a lot of times I didn't even want to start reading a series of books if they weren't written in the first person. That's just a particular thing for me in my detective stories. But there was one I got a couple of years ago called Racing the Devil by an author named Charles Todd. And he sets his books in the 19-teens and 1920s. It is first person, but it's kind of thing that I'm surprised that I even liked. I loved the book. And he has a series of these books, and they're about a detective who was shell-shocked in World War I, and so he has a lot of demons going around in his head, and that's not particularly my particular wheelhouse, as it were, but I really enjoy that, and the author Charles Todd is somebody who I would highly recommend as well. And the other little subset of books, and he didn't write many, but they sure are good, and I wrote a blog about this recently, are George Carlin's books. One of them is called Brain Droppings. One of them is called When Will Jesus Bring the Pork Chops? He wrote his own biography, which he decided early on to publish only posthumously, and it's called Last Words by George Carlin, obviously. And all three of those books, and he wrote a couple others, are highly recommended. The only thing I wouldn't recommend is that you don't read them on a plane, because you will, unless you don't mind being embarrassed by the fact that you're going to laugh out loud a lot, and people are going to look at you and want you to be a little more quiet and a little bit more respectful on the plane. But so if you are worried about that type of thing, then don't read any of George Carlin's books when you're flying. I give you that recommendation. Well, one thing you haven't heard me mention so far is baseball. And that doesn't mean that there aren't a whole lot of baseball books in front of me as I look at this particular bookcase. And as we continue this little tour, I'll continue on and talk a little bit about that. In fact, I'll probably talk a lot about that coming up. And there's some coffee table books to look at. It's just my little idea to perhaps inspire you to explore your bookcase that you've left untended or just untouched for quite a long time, for the books that you've read in the past and maybe a few that you'd like to read in the future. It's all part of our...
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
Did you experience hail damage last year and never got the work done? Most insurance companies only give you a year to get the roof fixed. And if you don't get it done, you could possibly not be compensated in full for the replacement of your roof. If you've been procrastinating getting that damaged roof taken care of, give us a call at 913-257-5426, and we'll send out an expert to help you through the process. We're never pushy, we're just here to help. Easton Roofing. Integrity matters.
Always great to catch up with Dr. Brad Whittle of Advanced Sports and Family Chiropractic and Acupuncture. Everybody wants to make every year a great one mentally and physically, and certainly ASFCA can help in that regard.
Chiropractic, acupuncture, physiotherapies, we're going to address the body and the mind to keep you in great shape. With winter moving into spring, we don't want to have the opportunity to get hurt or to be slow and not do what we used to do, right?
Absolutely right, and you can do that in a variety of ways.
We can. We love looking at the body and how it moves, looking at the posture and how it holds us to be strong, to be safe, and really to help us do those things we love to do.
The wide variety and range of services you can get helps in that regard at Advanced Sports and Family Chiropractic and Acupuncture. 7 locations all around the Kansas City area. Find the one that's most convenient for you. And for more information, visit asfca.com/Danny. That's asfca.com/Danny. If you'd like to join these and other fine sponsors and market your business to Kansas City's #1 variety podcast, contact us at danny@dannyclinkscale.com. Look forward to working with you. Welcome back, and if you listened to me through the years, you probably know that I love all sports, but baseball is my favorite sport. There are other sports maybe I even enjoyed playing more through the years. I don't know, I loved playing baseball when I played it. I certainly became an avid golfer. I loved playing basketball when I played it seriously for a few years. But baseball is really my love, and it's my love as a reporter and as a broadcaster and as a researcher. And I got the very first Bill James baseball abstract, and I got every single one of them until he started switching to doing something slightly different. They're not all in this particular bookcase, but there's quite a few of them, maybe years that I wanted to keep special. The very first one is here. The 1986 one is here because that was big year for the Astros, and it was still a baseball abstract. And those books obviously were written before seasons and about the previous season, so you kind of got a fun idea of what Bill James was thinking about, the great baseball sabermetrician, about a season ahead and maybe how accurate he would be about that particular season. Also, the Elias Baseball Abstract came out a few years after Bill James started, and that was a fantastic book. I don't really even know if they still do it. They probably do. A lot of these books were of a time where obviously there was no internet. You actually had to hunker down and get a book out and not just go to baseballreference.com, which is such a fantastic tool and which I use all the time now when I'm researching baseball as well. But there's something fun about just settling in and wasting a bunch of time looking at statistics, or in the case of Bill James, reading he was a very funny writer at times, and now you probably see him as a very voluminous tweeter, and he does polls and all kinds of things a lot. Has long since been in the Red Sox organization and does a little bit less of that now. I don't even know if he does any of that now, but they are quite a few Bill James baseball abstracts, and I certainly pull those out every now and then. But the one thing I do the most that regards baseball is I have an old copy of the Baseball Encyclopedia, and it's an edition that only goes up to 1987, I believe. I'm not looking at it right now. The inside of it, I'm looking at it, but it doesn't matter. That particular book is mine to pull out sometimes before I go to sleep, and I don't do that very often anymore. I used to do it more, but if I do that, then often it will be the Baseball Encyclopedia that will be laying on the bedside, opened up to a certain page, and all I do is just flip it open and start flipping to different pages, and it doesn't matter that all these players are from the 20s and 30s and 40s, because that's what I want. If I want more recent baseball information, I can go to a computer, and certainly I can go to a computer for that, but I love picking out that big, fat, heavy book and looking at baseball statistics, and I have several different types of baseball encyclopedias. And one other encyclopedia that I have that's really cool that I can highly recommend is a history of the NCAA basketball tournament. And that particular book goes up to 1990. And if you want to go on eBay or something like that, it's actually the Encyclopedia of the NCAA basketball tournament, written by Jim Savage, or compiled, I guess is more like it, and it has every single box score of every single NCAA tournament game through the year. Now, some of them are less sophisticated box scores from the past, but they certainly give you an idea of what went on, the players and so forth. There's a little bit of text as far as it's concerned for each year, and it's another thing where if you're interested in things more recent, then you can do that by looking at your computer, and if you just want to go on eBay or search out something, this would give you hours of endless silly fun looking at old NCAA tournament basketball box scores through the years, and it's something that's a whole lot of fun for me as well. The big coffee table and those type of books, I have a bunch of those too. A lot of them are movie books with beautiful movie pictures. Some of them are things that I've just found in old big bookstores. There's a thing called Bobby Jones Extra, which is a bunch of headlines from newspapers about the great golfer Bobby Jones. Another time you think of things that are mileposts in your life, I have this gigantically fat pictorial chronicle of the 20th century, historical one. That was a Christmas present from a girlfriend. I remember that. And I don't remember what year it was. It was around 1988, 87, something like that. And I still go back and look at that particular book every now and then. My high school yearbook is there, and there's a big fat coffee stain on there, which is odd because I don't drink coffee. There's a book of classic singles. That's mostly a pictorial book. I have a whole bunch of those type of books, one called A World of Movies, The Hollywood Archivist. There's a history of the MGM studios in the glory days that I got in the library somewhere sometime. I may have even purloined that particular book. I'm not particularly sure. Maybe I found it in an old bookstore. Maybe I didn't. I don't know. I was known to maybe borrow a book or two from a library during my course in time. I'm probably the only person in the history of college, maybe not, who actually used to cut class to go to the library and just enjoy the things at the library that had nothing to do with my studies. And there's probably a couple of books kicking around here that are in that particular vein as well. So far and wide, from a big 1,000-page book about Ted Williams and a bunch of other things that I haven't maybe even quite gotten to yet. That's one of them. I've only read about a third of the book by Ben Bradley Jr. called The Kid about Ted Williams. It's really a great book. I just started it and never have completed it. And that's the other thing that's a real treasure of sitting here right now and looking at the two, main bookcases that I look at the most. There's a big one downstairs that has more of my wife's stuff in it and all her opera singing things and stuff like that. And some of my books, like about 8 editions of Leonard Maltin's movie reviews, those little capsule movie reviews for you. But those things are all tremendous amount of fun. But kind of taking this thing full circle, one of the real regrets of my life is that at one point in time, things weren't going so well, and I lived in a bad apartment in Lawrence, Kansas, and the car that I was driving at the time conked out, died. I didn't have the money to fix it, and so it just sat there in the parking lot, and they wanted me to get rid of it. And being a lazy, not very focused person that I was at that point in time, I just kind of let it ride and didn't do anything with it. And one day I came back from trying to seek employment around Lawrence, and the car was gone. It's not that I was ever going to drive it again. It was dead. It was on blocks, basically, but I had never completely unloaded the car. It was the car I drove back from Massachusetts the last time I went to Lawrence, Kansas to live, when I would end up working in a bean factory and then concluding my college years. But the upshot of the story for this particular enterprise is the fact that there was a huge trunk that contained all the books that I had then, and I had never unloaded it from that car. And they took it to the junkyard, and I went basically the same day. I found a friend and went racing out there, and they had actually smashed the car and flattened it, and that all those books were gone. And there's only a couple of books out of that I really regret, and one of them's just goofy, silly fun. It was a book called The 50 Worst Films of All Time, and it was a hysterically funny book. It was written in the late 1970s, maybe later than. No, it was later because The Omen was in it, so it was probably the early 80s. And I've never been able to find that book. I have looked and looked and looked online and researched it. And maybe if you're out there listening right now and you can find it, that'd be a great thing. I think I wrote about it in a blog or two before. And then there was also History of the American Presidency. It was a fantastic book I got when I was a kid, actually, from my parents for a birthday present. And it was really, really a great book. And I think it went up to about 1968 or something like that. And it'd be a chapter of like 50, 75 pages about each presidential election, and there were cartoons and photographs. It was just a fabulous book, and those are the only two things I really, really remember from that particular trunk full of books. But in the case of me staring at these bookcases right now, that is a wistful moment in my life when those one really silly book and one book that I really treasured very much, the presidential book that was such an epic thing, probably was, again, maybe 1,000 pages long. So from an encyclopedia of rock to Robert B. Parker to Hollywood to the little artifacts you have, my bookcases almost completely have books in them, but there is my favorite picture of myself and my daughters from when they were, young teens, and it was on my birthday, and I love that picture. There's a Houston Astros baseball up there. There's a couple of other doodads, but mostly there's just books. And every now and then I just like coming in here and taking a look at it, and I think that this is something that maybe you should do. There must be a bookcase in your house that has a whole bunch of things that you hardly ever look at. And sometimes it's just a whole lot of fun to go back and do it again. I've only scratched the surface of what I did. You probably got more information than you ever wanted to have. But indeed, it's a nice trip down memory lane for me, and maybe something that could trigger some great memories for you, be it the books that you've read, that you haven't read, that you want to read, that you want to revisit. Those mystery books that I've all read, I can't really reread them that often, maybe once in a while, because I know what happens, even though I don't care about the plot that much. I care about the way they're written, so I do go back every now and then. I think I've only missed about 6 or 7 of Robert Parker's books, which I haven't been able to find yet. So those are the types of things I wanted to explore today, and